Good morning. We're glad that you're joining us for the Bible study this morning. Sorry about the delay that we've had. I just want to let you know that it's taking longer for Pastor Scott and I in hair and makeup. You know, this just doesn't happen, and so, not really, but Pastor Scott will explain to you why we are delayed, but we're glad you're here with us.
Yeah, live streaming is a new Wild West for us at All Saints, and you know, every time that we think we have a handle on it, indeed we don't. Google and YouTube throw some kind of code at us that we don't quite know how to handle, so that's what we're looking at today. But thank you for being patient with us. Today we're going to look at John 14:15 to 21 out of the New Revised Standard Version. Jesus said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me, and those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them."
This is an interesting text. Again, it continues the gospel reading from last week in that this is Jesus' farewell discourse. He's talking to the disciples. He is reassuring them. And so in this text, he's reassuring them that while he is leaving, there will be an advocate that comes. But what I discovered today, and I guess I know I've seen it before, it just never hit me like this in verse 16 where it says, "And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate." It is the fact that while here, Jesus has been their advocate. And now when he's gone, they're going to make sure that there's an advocate here for us, for the disciples. And so I think reassuring for them in the fact that there's going to be this ongoing peace for them, even when Jesus is gone. Clearly, I don't think they understand exactly what Jesus is talking about, but there's perhaps a sense of peace, knowing that this will go beyond Jesus and into the future as well.
I think this text is probably the most fitting yet that we've read during the pandemic. Again, Jesus on his final night with the disciples, preparing them for the loss that they will experience. And we've lost a lot. We've lost the ability to gather, to go out to eat, to, you know, you've said grandparents seeing grandkids, the ability to do a lot of the freedoms that we have been able to do. And so I think we can kind of relate to this sense of what's going to happen. What will this feel like? And so we do find in this text, I think, a parallel that things will be uncertain, things will be different, but God, the Holy Spirit, will be with them and us. And so I do find, like you said, a lot of comfort in that. In fact, one of the meanings of advocate is also comforter. So.
Right. And I also like the text in John defines spirit a little bit more than just here's an advocate, the Spirit who will be with you, because in verse 17 it says, "This is the Spirit of truth." And for John, truth is so important. We saw last week when Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so that sense of truth also comes up, remember, at the trial where Pilate is talking about truth, and Jesus says the truth will set you free, and there's all this truth that's happening in here. And really the truth is Jesus. I think that sometimes when we hear the truth will set you free, suddenly we're trying to figure out what that truth is.
Yeah.
And we let a lot of worldly things come into our lives, and maybe that's the truth. I remember in the movie City Slickers, you might be too young for that, but in the movie City Slickers, they would say there's one thing, one thing. And then they each individually searched for that one thing.
Yeah.
Here it is, I believe, the one thing is the truth, is Jesus Christ. And we who are believers know that we don't each individually seek out our own truth. We seek the truth of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. To each his own is a popular
Yes.
way of thinking and being in the world, but certainly we believe that we believe in one truth. And so I did want to ask you, Bonnie, the Holy Spirit I think is kind of difficult for Lutherans sometimes to talk about. How do you think about the Holy Spirit? Do you think of the Holy Spirit as an advocate, as John calls him? Or do you think of the Holy Spirit as a comforter, a helper, or maybe something completely different?
Yeah, I think for me the Spirit is all of those things, and not just one piece. It really depends on where we are in life. You know, right now during this pandemic, it may be that we really are seeking the comforter. But I think in some way, even now during this pandemic, I'm going to say this too, this may sound odd, but I would also call the Holy Spirit the pointer. And when I say the pointer is that when we look to the Spirit is always pointing to God, and who is always pointing us in the right direction.
Yeah.
Always pointing us in the right direction. So, so there are a lot of pieces I believe that the Spirit is, which is why it's difficult for us to get a handle on it.
Yeah.
We want concrete. You know, we like the fact that Jesus was a person, and Jesus points us to God, and we sort of have this thing with God and the relationship between God and the Son. But this whole thing of Holy Spirit is just sort of...
And I think we've seen a lot of either televangelists or false prophets, if you will, kind of invoke the Holy Spirit in a really charismatic, almost fear-inducing way.
Yes.
So I find, the Holy Spirit conveyed in this passage of John to be not only an advocate, but a companion, an abiding companion. And I find a lot of comfort in that in times where I don't know what my next steps will be, when we at All Saints don't know what our next steps will be, we find peace and comfort in the fact that God is dwelling and abiding with us through the Holy Spirit, guiding us in ways that we don't even always know.
Absolutely.
But we know it's happening.
Right.
We know that we have that guide with us.
And there comes the trust that sometimes we don't know what the next step will be, but the Spirit moves us in that direction and keeps moving us forward in the direction we're called to go.
Right.
I want to, if I may, if you would indulge me, please, I'm going to go back to John chapter 1 and at verse 12. I kind of want to show you how Jesus is tying things up here. So if you look at John chapter 1, verse 12, it says this: "But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God." So we hang on to that. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God. Now let's come to this text where Jesus is leaving the disciples. And here's an important phrase that he says to them, important piece that he gives to them. "I will not leave you orphaned." So for them, if Jesus leaves, they now realize that they've become children of God. They're brothers and sisters of Jesus Christ in a sense. But if Jesus leaves, then their feeling is that they could absolutely feel as if they've been abandoned. And that it is that peace is, I will not leave you orphaned, referring back to, you're children of God. And so we are not going to leave you alone in this place. We are going to send. And Jesus says, I am coming to you. The reference here, so the Spirit will be here, but in the meantime. But Jesus here also says to them, promises to them, that Jesus will come again. So in that I am coming to you, Jesus is also projecting what's going to happen in the future. And hopefully that too is a word of comfort.
Right.
That we're not alone in this. In the meantime, the Spirit will be guiding us until Jesus returns once again. So I love how that the connection is made from the first chapter of John all the way back here to the 14th chapter.
And the term orphaned, I think, is, again, I hadn't thought about that, so powerful. Orphan is a family term,
Yes.
So we're not being, Jesus is not saying, again, I will not leave you alone, or I won't abandon you. He's using a very familial term of, I will not leave you orphaned, because I am your father.
Right. There will continue to be a relationship. Usually when we consider ourselves to be orphaned, is that a relationship has been severed. I remember when my mom died, and my dad had already passed away, there was this feeling of being orphaned, in that the relationship, the physical relationship with mother and father was gone. Here Jesus is saying that the relationship will not be severed. No matter what happens, it will always be there. And in that sense, the word orphaned is good here, because it does give that familial relationship.
Okay. Oh. Do you want us to keep taping?
Sure.
But we'll be... I'll just pause a minute for editing. But a way of being with us through every trial in life, and I think that's what we need to hear, especially in a pandemic, when we all want to hear things will be okay, things will get back to normal. What I'm hearing on the news from the most trusted voices is, we need to prepare for a new normal for a considerable amount of time, and no one wants to hear that. I mean, it's like, this deadly news kind of sprinkling us, and that school might look different, that sports might be canceled, that if you go out to eat, you're going to have to be, 10 feet apart. So I like the fact that Jesus is not offering some kind of empty platitude and promising a life free of pain, but that even I have to leave you, he's saying, but I won't totally leave you. I will send an advocate.
Exactly. And the thing I think that's important for us to know about the farewell discourse in John is that this is John preparing them for a new normal. Life for them will not be the same anymore. And as I was reading commentaries, one of the commentaries was that this doesn't all end. We sometimes think that it ends with resurrection, or it ends with ascension. Those are not endings, but beginnings. They are beginnings of what we now are called to do. So it is as a result of the resurrection, as the result of Jesus' ascension, what's our new normal? As Christians, how do we continue to live out the faith, showing people that we trust in something that we can't necessarily see, but that we believe to be true? There it goes back to the truth. We believe that Jesus Christ lived, ministered, died, was raised again, and ascended into heaven. And so the question, I think, then, that was for the disciples that Jesus is answering here, and is for us as well, is that post-resurrection, post-ascension, we're still here. And if we're still here, what does that mean for us? So I do believe this farewell discourse in John is setting us up for Pentecost. That, and again, in Luke has the Holy Spirit coming on the day of Pentecost. So, but that's what this is preparing us for. This is what was preparing the disciples for. What's your new normal? And how are you going to live into the future? But knowing this, you're not going to live into the future as a Christian without the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And that's how important
Mm-hmm.
the Spirit is in our lives.
Yeah. Well, that might be a good place to wrap up for today. We do apologize if you kind of get this Bible study in two different segments, but thank you for viewing as always. Thank you to Bonnie for all that you do to continue to lead us in these Bible studies and live streaming. And thank you to you all for tuning in, for your continual support of us and the staff and of this ministry that we all share. We hope to be with you again soon. Bye-bye now.